Thanks everyone so much for joining us today when we'll be discussing the path to unstoppable wellness, the secret weapon in workplace performance. So as the presentation unfolds, if anybody has any questions at all, please type them in the Q&A section here in Zoom. And then at the very end of the presentation, we'll go through the questions and answer them one by one. All right. So again, as was mentioned, my name is Dr. Gene Ketzelman. I'm a doctor of physical therapy, a certified strength and conditioning specialist, and a certified applied prevention and health promotion therapist. And I specialize in teaching people with chronic and unresolved pain or poor health the precise ways to reclaim their lives. So before we begin, I just want to mention that the things that we're going to be talking about today and all the information that we're going to be going over is based on what the research shows to help the majority of people. But please keep in mind that each person is an individual. So the content and information within this program is educational only and should not be relied upon for the purpose of replacing formal medical care. Please be sure to consult with a licensed healthcare provider if you are experiencing undiagnosed pain, poor health, illness, or other symptoms, or if your condition is either worsening or not improving. It's important to check with your doctor prior to starting any health practice or routine, and do not discontinue or modify any medications or other physician recommendations prior to speaking with your physician. All right, so as a small business owner myself, right, I know firsthand the importance of focusing on improving the performance of your business. Over time, we'd all like to see our wealth go up through our business. And when I say wealth, I'd like to point out, I'm not only speaking about financial wealth, which of course I am referring to as well, but I'm also speaking about the wealth that you gain from creating an impact, from really helping people, helping the world with your product or your service. So usually when we're talking about improving business performance, there are four main areas that most entrepreneurs, business owners will focus on, right? And those four areas usually kind of revolve around administration, marketing, sales, and service delivery. So of course, these four are extremely important for most businesses, right? To improve the performance of most businesses. But the question today that I'd like to bring up is whether there may be another factor that's often missed that might actually sit as the cornerstone of all four of these things. So is there something that is at the heart of all four? And to answer that, let's think about what really dictates the outcome of working on these four things. So what is going to help the performance in all four of these things? And to kind of put simply, it's all about the follow through, right? So we can learn all about administration and marketing and sales and service delivery. But if you're not actually there to do those things, to actually follow through on the things that you learn, if you put together great systems, but you don't do those systems, right, it's not going to help. The most important piece is the follow through. And so what are the barriers to the follow through? What keeps us from actually being able to follow through on the things that we know we need to be able to do? So there are two big barriers that I'd like to discuss in this presentation. So they are absenteeism and presenteeism. And I'll explain a little bit about what those actually mean. So absenteeism is when you are physically absent from work or other responsibilities. In other words, you're not physically there to do the job you need to do. So that's absenteeism. Presenteeism is that you are physically there. You're there, you're ready to work, but your performance is lacking. You do not have good productivity. And to put simply, you're distracted. There is something that's keeping you from being fully engaged. So those are the two big ones. Either you're not there to do the job, or you are there, but you can't really give it your all. So what's the underlying cause of presenteeism and absenteeism? That's the big question. And of course, that's what we're here to talk about. It's poor wellness. That is a very large factor in bringing forth absenteeism and presenteeism. So when considering absenteeism, think about it this way. Illness and or poor health may lead to time off work. So if you're away from work, you're not able to contribute to your overall operations. You're not able to do the job that you know you need to do. So overall, your business performance will worsen, but there's also going to be increased work stress when you return, right? If there's a lot of work piling up and you have to be away because you're not feeling well, when you come back, there's definitely going to be even more on your plate. And then if you happen to have any employees or partners, while you're away, there's more stress on them. Right. So even when you step away from the business and you think, well, somebody else is there, those people need to pick up the slack. And so overall, being away from your work is going to put a lot of pressure on your business and those you work with. For presenteeism, there are various negative health conditions that may have a significant negative impact on your ability to focus and concentrate, learn, think clearly, problem solve, and bring innovative ideas to the table. So if you're not feeling well, I'm sure that you can really think back to a time when you were either not feeling well, sick, you had an injury or pain or something was going wrong, and you saw just how difficult it was to really concentrate on the job you need to do, right? Or to try to solve problems when you have so many other problems in the background. So all these negative health conditions may lead to those distractions. And then over time, it may lead to burnout, along with a lost sense of satisfaction and fulfillment from work. So finally, I'd like to talk a little bit about the financial burden of all of this, right? Go a little bit more into the specifics of what this all means in terms of finances. So this is direct quote from Center of Disease Control. Preventable chronic conditions are a major contributor to the cost of health insurance premiums and employee medical claims, which are at an all-time high and continue to rise in the United States. 4 of the 10 most costly health conditions for US employers, which is chest pain, high blood pressure, diabetes, and heart attack, are related to heart disease and stroke. In addition, work stress is the leading workplace health problem and a major occupational health risk, ranking above physical inactivity and obesity. So chronic health conditions and unhealthy behaviors are also reduce worker productivity, as we mentioned. 5 chronic diseases or risk factors: high blood pressure, diabetes, smoking, physical inactivity, and obesity cost U.S. employers $36.4 billion a year because of employees missing days of work. So reading through this, you can see the enormous impact that wellness has on your bottom line for your business. If you have employees and they're struggling with their wellness, well, there's a lot of money that goes out for that in terms of paying insurance premiums and all of that, right? But also for yourself, if you don't have any employees, you still need to pay your own healthcare costs as well. And that takes quite a bit out, right? So keep in mind that this does directly influence the financial status of your business. So the big question is, are we hopeless? Is there anything that we can actually do about all of this? And of course, the good news is we absolutely can, and that's why we're here today, to learn about what we can do. So the World Health Organization has stated that adopting a pessimistic attitude, some people believe that there is nothing that can be done. In reality, the major causes of chronic diseases are known. And if these risk factors were eliminated, at least 80% of all heart disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes would be prevented, over 40% of cancer would be prevented. The Center of Disease Control goes on to say 6 in 10 Americans live with at least one chronic disease, like heart disease and stroke, cancer, or diabetes. These and other chronic diseases are the leading causes of death and disability in America. And they're also a leading driver of healthcare costs, like what we mentioned before. We know that most chronic diseases can be prevented by eating well, being physically active, avoiding tobacco and excessive drinking, and getting regular health screenings. So today's presentation, for the remaining of today's presentation, I'd like to focus on 5 key areas that's going to take this information a step further. So I refer to these as the convergent pillars of wellness and performance. And these are the 5 pillars of wellness that if you're able to focus on, if you're able to really put forth an effort in improving these areas, you can significantly change your overall health and your performance in the workplace. So before we get started, I want to point out that just working on each one of these separately will already provide benefit, right? If you just bring in movement and exercise, that would be amazing. If you improve your nutrition, that would be amazing. But if you're able to actually integrate all 5 of these, then that's where the big benefits really come in. So hopefully over time, you'll see through this presentation how over time, you'll be able to bring all of this into your everyday life. And it can make a really serious impact on your overall health and business performance. So we'll begin with the first pillar, and I refer to this pillar as state. And what state is in this approach that we're speaking of is it's the state of your internal balance between stress and recovery. What is your balance between stress and recovery? So what's the significance of this? So first of all, before I even mention anything on this slide, let's think back to a previous slide where they said that stress in the workplace may just be one of the, if not the most significant negative health aspects, right? And the negative health effects coming from work. So if we can help to control stress or to manage stress better, then that already can have a huge impact. So let's go over why stress is such a big deal. Why is everybody talking so much about stress? Because obviously this is nothing new. Everybody knows that stress is important to manage, but why? So stress directly influences a part of our nervous system known as the autonomic nervous system. And this part of the nervous system is what controls the unconscious automatic processes. So for instance, the autonomic nervous system dictates control of your hormonal balance, your immune function, your cardiovascular health and circulation, your respiratory health, digestive and urinary health, electrolyte balance, nervous system function, physical healing from trauma and injury, and physical and emotional pain. All of these things, as well as many others, are dictated through the autonomic nervous system, and stress directly influences the autonomic nervous system. So let's talk a little bit about how. The autonomic nervous system is broken down into 2 primary divisions, let's say. The first division is the sympathetic nervous system. And many have heard about the sympathetic nervous system as the fight, flight, or freeze response, right? If you hear fight or flight, that's your sympathetic nervous system. That's the stress part of your nervous system. The other part of the autonomic nervous system is the parasympathetic nervous system. This is referred to as the rest, digest, and recover. So they're the 2 opposite spectrums, and it's all about balancing these 2 out, balancing out the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. So this is a pretty busy slide, and I just included it so that you can go and look back at it if you want more of the details. But I'm just going to speak on the important points, or the most important points that I think we should talk about for this particular presentation. So first, let's look at how it affects your alertness. So if you're in a sympathetic response, if you're in that stress, fight or flight response, your adrenaline goes up and your vigilance goes up. Vigilance is the process of constantly looking at what dangers are out there, what can go wrong. And so, of course, this is important for survival. It's there for a reason that if you're in a fight or flight mode, you want to be looking at what could go wrong. But now think about this from a business standpoint. If you're constantly under a lot of stress, your mind will only be not only, but primarily will be fixated on what can go wrong, on that negative aspect. What are all the bad things going on? What are all the dangers? What do I need to worry about? And then as you worry about those things, you're going to be even more sympathetic fight or flight. And it's going to be this vicious circle. And that's why you'll find that many people that are constantly under this constant stress are very fixated on all of the problems. And it's not necessarily anybody's fault. It's hardwired into our nervous system. When we're in fight or flight mode, we are looking for the danger. But when we could get more into the parasympathetic, that vigilance begins to go down, and we may be able to see things more clearly, see things as they really are from both sides, the positives and the negatives, rather being what we call like tunnel vision on the negative. So in terms of other aspects of our health, for the sympathetic nervous system, again, fight or flight, it increases your heart rate, it changes your blood vessels and potentially constricts them, leading to increased blood pressure, and it makes you more likely to breathe faster and more shallow. So it can directly affect your cardiovascular system. While the parasympathetic nervous system does the opposite, where it can slow down, calm down the heart rate, it can dilate the blood vessels, and it can allow you to breathe slower and more deep. Moving on to the digestive system, if you are in the sympathetic part, if you're in that stressed fight or flight, you actually get less blood flow going to your digestive organs. And if there is less blood flow going to the digestive organs, then there's less, your digestive organs aren't functioning as well as they can, right? Blood flow is going to other places, leaving your digestive system, and so that you just won't be able to absorb and digest food as well as you normally could. While the parasympathetic nervous system is called rest, digest, and recover for a reason. It actually improves the function of your digestive system because it improves blood flow, circulation to those areas. So then we move on to the hormonal system. And when you're in that stress response, you have increased cortisol, you release more sugar into your blood, and you have to release more insulin. And this could be a big factor for those with diabetes. And then finally, for the immune system, when you're in that fight or flight response for a long period of time, you end up having chronic inflammation, and the overall strength of your immune system begins to go down. So as you can see from those, it makes an enormous impact. Stress, the balance between the stress and the recovery significantly impacts your overall health as well as your performance. So in terms of performance, the ability to manage your state can result in reduced fear, worry, procrastination, and burnout. So by being able to shift more towards the parasympathetic, the recovery side, your vigilance goes down, you can think more clearly. And so the ability to manage your state can also result in greater mental clarity, creativity, productivity, ability to problem solve, and it improves satisfaction and fulfillment from work. So now moving on to nutrition. The research is quite clear that adequate and appropriate nutrition is required for all cells to function optimally, and this includes the cells of the immune system. One of the most important medical discoveries of the past 2 decades has been that the immune system and inflammatory processes are involved in not just a few select disorders, but a wide variety of mental and physical health problems that dominate present-day morbidity and mortality worldwide. Chronic inflammatory diseases have been recognized as the most significant cause of death in the world today, with more than 50% of all deaths being attributable to inflammation-related diseases. So some of those diseases that are associated with high inflammation are cardiovascular disease, diabetes, arthritis and joint disease, depression, cancer, autoimmune conditions, irritable bowel syndrome, Alzheimer's disease, allergies, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and chronic kidney disease. These are just some of the very, very, very many chronic diseases that are associated with high inflammation. So I bring this up in nutrition because the research is quite clear that our nutrition plays a very significant role in helping us manage the inflammatory state of our body. So our nutrition can either help decrease our inflammation, or it can increase our inflammation. So according to the research, an anti-inflammatory diet, so a diet that brings down inflammation, was mainly plant-based, rich in vegetables, fruits, fish, nuts, and legumes, and low in meats, dairy, and bakery. So if you want to focus on that anti-inflammatory aspect, try to include those in your diet. And this research paper also concludes that there is strong and consistent support for the hypothesis that a pro-inflammatory diet, so a diet that increases inflammation, is associated with increased all-cause mortality. That means that diets that increase inflammation have the ability to increase your chance of dying from any cause. So again, nutrition has a direct role in our health. So not just our health, but nutrition, again, impacts our performance. And to understand that, let's look a little bit more at sugar. Sugar is the energy source needed for our brains to remain alert. And it's really difficult to concentrate when your blood sugar is low. Processed foods are highly inflammatory and tend to raise blood sugar quickly. So if you eat a lot of processed foods, I showed donuts in this case, but basically any food that has a lot of added ingredients that aren't occurring naturally, then these foods increase inflammation. So it's that pro-inflammatory diet, and they raise blood sugar more quickly. And this results in a burst of energy initially. You feel better after eating these foods, definitely. And you may even be able to think a little bit clearer for a short period of time. But because that blood sugar rises so quickly, it then drops very quickly too. And you end up in a slump, making you have an even more difficult time concentrating and working, leading you to want even more of these kinds of foods. And it's a vicious cycle. So being able to control your sugar intake and trying to avoid the processed foods can really help you in the workplace. Okay, moving on to movement. World Health Organization has said that physical inactivity is one of the leading risk factors for non-communicable diseases and death worldwide. To individuals, the failure to enjoy adequate levels of physical activity increases the risk of cancer, heart disease, stroke, and diabetes by 20 to 30%, and shortens lifespan by 3 to 5 years. Moreover, physical inactivity burdens society through the hidden and growing costs of medical care and loss of productivity. So again, exactly what we've been talking about. Increased cost, decreased productivity. So again, the research has showed that a lack of physical activity affects almost every cell, organ, and system in the body, causing sedentary dysfunction and accelerated death. The massive multifactorial nature of dysfunction caused by being sedentary means that just as food and reproduction remain as requirements for long-term continued human existence, physical activity is also a requirement to maximize health span and lifespan. So there is a whole host of positive physical and mental health and performance benefits of staying active. Some of those just include reduce excess body fat, increase lean muscle mass, improve circulation, reduced inflammation, improved focus, improved creativity, and the ability to fight off depression. So how much movement do we really need? The suggested amount is a total of 150 to 300 combined minutes per week of moderate intensity exercise. Ideally, it would be about 3 to 5 days per week of aerobic exercise and 2 days per week of strength training. You'd like to maintain proper sitting, standing, and lifting technique, and change postures and positions within every 30 to 60 minutes at work if possible. Next, moving on to the importance of sleep. So there was a great presentation done a few weeks ago here on SCORE that talked about all of the kind of the impact of sleep on health and business performance. And so I definitely suggest that presentation as well. But just as a quick recap, that sleep has a direct connection with learning and memory, cardiovascular health, immune health, hormonal health, your DNA, and all-cause mortality. In other words, sleep is connected with basically passing away for any cause. How much sleep is suggested? So the research shows that 6 to 9 hours of deep, uninterrupted sleep is suggested. 7 to 8 hours is kind of ideally recommended, and 8 hours is best. Okay, our final pillar, last but not least, connection. So there has been quite a bit of research as of late looking at the impact of poor connection and loneliness on health. So the dangers of low social connection and loneliness include higher inflammation at the cellular level, and we talked about what that means, how important inflammation is. Higher susceptibility to anxiety and depression, slower recovery from disease, increased antisocial behavior and violence, and increased incidence of suicide. But the benefits of high social connection is 50% increased chance of longevity, stronger gene expression for immunity, lower rates of anxiety and depression, and it promotes social, emotional, and physical well-being. So of course, the goal is to develop strong and meaningful connections. When it comes to the workplace in particular, there are 4 big connections that I'd like us to focus on. So the first connection, the connection that we need to start with, is the connection with ourselves. And what that really means in practice, so the practicality of it, is to basically focus on all 5 of these pillars. You know, connect with yourself and realize that your health and your wellness is enormously important. It's not just about all the things that are going on outside of you. Your health really matters. Your state really matters, right? So being able to really utilize all 5 of these pillars to really improve your wellness is going to end up improving the overall performance of your business. The next connection that's really important is the connection to the business mission and the culture. It's really important to always remember the purpose of your business. Why are you actually doing what you're doing, right? If you lose sight of that, it's very easy to go down a hole where you begin to make decisions that maybe you're not as proud of, or the overall direction of your business may change in a direction that you wish it wasn't going in. It's always important to stay connected with your mission and the culture of your business. And if you have employees, to also be sure that all of the employees or any partners are also always in touch with the business mission and the culture. The other connection is the connection to employees, employers, and partners, or in other words, connection with those that you work with, if you have any, right? You always want to make sure that you're not losing touch with those that are around you that you're working with. And then finally, a connection with your clients or those that you're serving. Make sure they have a good, strong connection with those who you're serving and you're providing your product or your service to. So there's an essential skill in connection, one basically prerequisite to be able to connect with anybody, with yourself or with others. And that's mindfulness. So mindfulness is obviously a very, very big buzzword right now, right? And many people talk about mindfulness meditation, which has very, very many benefits. But what I'm going to talk about in this particular aspect is mindfulness in action. What does mindfulness mean in life, not just meditation, even though meditation with mindfulness is very important and it trains this aspect. So mindfulness really just means purposeful and non-judgmental awareness of the present moment. It just means being able to focus on what is going on here in front of you without thinking too much about the past, without thinking too much about the future, and without being too judgmental. Just seeing things as they are clearly. And then from this point, we can really develop our connections. So I like to say, you must be present in order to connect. If you're not here, how can you connect with somebody? So the initial step of having a strong connection is learning to practice mindfulness and being present in the moment. Once you're able to be present and have mindfulness, there are two superpowers that I like to speak on in terms of connection: gratitude and compassion. So in life, in business, there are things that are going to go right and there are things that are going to go wrong. Some of the most efficient ways to connect with the good and the not so good include gratitude and compassion. There's been a wealth of research coming out about the enormous health benefits of gratitude and compassion. So when things seem good, when you have your successes, when everything is going well, don't take it for granted. Make sure to practice gratitude, and practice gratitude for yourself, for the purpose and mission of your business. Be grateful for all those that you work with, if you have anybody that you work with, and be grateful to your customers and those you serve, and express that gratitude. And same thing when things don't go as well. Practice compassion, right? Compassion is the ability to connect with the not so good feelings, the pain of either yourself or others, but then to have a genuine desire to resolve that pain. Rather than getting stuck on the pain and fixated on all the things that are going wrong, you notice that pain, you feel the discomfort, but then you place your focus on kindness and the ability to actually help resolve that pain. So those are the two superpowers, gratitude and compassion. Okay, so it's time to take action. I'd like to close off this presentation by giving two practices, so two specific exercises or things to focus on that can help bring all of these 5 pillars into action. So the first practice I like to suggest is to harness the power of physical activity. So physical activity, like we mentioned in the movement section of the pillar, has many benefits in terms of health and wellness, but also in terms of performance and the ability to focus, concentrate, memorize, all of that. Right. So the suggestions are, when sitting, change postures and positions within every 30 to 60 minutes. Just be conscious of your posture. Of course, try to keep a nice posture, a nice upright, but in general, change something about how you are sitting or how you're placed. Put some kind of movement in. When possible, move and walk at least every 2 to 3 hours throughout the day. And that could be just 1 minute. That can be going to the restroom. That can be using the printer, getting a glass of water, something. But standing up from your desk, if you spend a lot of time at your desk and you're sitting a lot, getting up and being able to move at least every 2 to 3 hours. Then deliberately increase physical activity demands during normal everyday tasks. So take the stairs instead of the elevator. Park at the back of the parking lot, go for a stroll around the block at lunchtime, and avoid asking others to help get or bring you something. If you're always asking for somebody to bring you something, you're robbing yourself of an opportunity to improve your wellness and ultimately your workplace performance. Any chance you have to move, within reason, of course, but try to move, right? It's good for you, it's good for your body, and it's good for your brain. And finally, perform some form of physical movement activity prior to important meetings or events, and prior to tasks requiring increased focus, memorization, creativity, or problem solving. So think about it as if you are basically sitting all day, it's as if your mind is gradually kind of shutting off as well. But by bringing in movement, you're waking your mind up. So there has been quite a bit of research showing the link between movement and mental performance. So try to use it to your advantage and kind of add in some type of movement before these important events. Okay, practice 2, harness the power of breath. So this is a big one, and I know many people right now are talking about breath, but I really want to share kind of how it's broken down and how it all works, because if you understand this, you're really going to be able to use this to your advantage. So breath has been studied for quite some time now, and there's more than enough scientific research showing how breath directly influences our state. So remember the balance between stress and recovery. So I'll go through 4 of the big factors here. When you breathe through your mouth, it creates more of a sympathetic or a stress response, while breathing through your nose increases the parasympathetic, the recovery response. When you breathe through your chest primarily, if you take big breaths and your chest rises and expands, that is more of a stress response. While if you focus on the diaphragm, on the belly, if you can focus on expanding the belly during the inhale, and then the belly goes down during the exhale, that's more of the parasympathetic recovery response. If you breathe fast, that's more of the stress response. And if you breathe slow, that's more of the recovery response. And then finally, the inhale and the exhale also has a big role. When you inhale, it naturally increases the sympathetic, the fight or flight aspect of our nervous system, while the exhale is what is more so associated with the parasympathetic aspect. Okay, so knowing that each inhale and exhale changes the balance of our nervous system. So with this information, let's use it to our advantage. If the goal is to be in a state of performance where you know you need to act and you know you need to do something, but stress is out of control, you want to try to use an equal rate of inhale and exhale. So breathe where your inhale and your exhale are the same duration. So for instance, if you're in this stress response, but you need to perform, then a very good practice would be to do something along the lines of maybe 3-second inhale, 3-second exhale, 4-second inhale, or 4-second exhale, and basically make your inhale and exhale equal. There is no best number. Like it's not like the prescription is you have to do 5-second inhale, 5-second exhale. It doesn't work like that because everybody has a different like basically breathing performance or ability to do this. But the goal is to find an equal inhale and exhale that is comfortable and that does not increase your stress. And then try to hold that, try to continue to breathe that way for at least 2 minutes. If, on the other hand, you're trying to recover, let's say the workday is done or it's nighttime and you want to use it to help you go to sleep, then what you want to do is make the exhale longer than your inhale. So let's say you inhale for 4 seconds, the exhale would be maybe 5 seconds or 6 seconds or 7 seconds, right? So if you can make the exhale longer than your inhale, it's going to promote that recovery aspect, the parasympathetic aspect. Okay, so again, for at least 2 minutes, but really you can do it until you feel a change in your nervous system, the change in how you're feeling. And then the next piece, last piece of this practice that I'd like to mention is that when you are doing this, try to put all of your focus on your breath. Keep your focus on your breath. And this is where mindfulness and connection come in. This is the actual practice of mindfulness. And this is a good way to start practicing mindfulness. When you are doing this, focus on the breath. You're counting the breath, focus on that. As your mind begins to wander, because it certainly will, especially during times of stress, gently bring it back to the breath. Notice that it went somewhere and then just bring it back. And make sure that you bring it back with compassion, with kindness. If you notice that your mind wandered, try not to become angry about it, because that'll defeat the purpose. You want to train the connection aspect pillar, right? The connection pillar, by practicing compassion. When you notice that your mind goes somewhere else, just recognize, yeah, my mind was somewhere else. Of course it did. I'm under a lot of stress, but let's bring it back to the breathing. So if you can practice that, it can really help improve the state, right? So being able to bring back the balance of recovery and stress, and it'll help begin training connection, help begin training mindfulness and compassion. All right. Good. So let's close off by piecing it all together. Remember that, as we discussed, there are 4 aspects of business performance that most focus on: administration, marketing, sales, and service delivery. But what I hope you were able to see through this presentation is that the piece that lies at the heart of it all is your wellness. If your wellness isn't quite there, then either there's going to be absenteeism where you're physically not present to do these 4 aspects of your business, or there's going to be presenteeism where you may be doing it, but your productivity may very well suffer. So you can use wellness to make sure that you are present, you're aware, your performance is high, and that you're productive. So last piece, let's just kind of bring it all together with the path to unstoppable wellness. The way to go about it. Remember, beginning was it's time to take responsibility. Realize that many of these chronic conditions, many of these health situations can be highly influenced by lifestyle factors, particularly the 5 that I spoke on, right? Of course, they can't prevent all. Of course, there are going to be times that you can do everything right, and you may still come down with a negative health condition. But it has such a, the percentage of its ability to improve those things is very high. There's a lot of research showing that there's a lot that we can do, right? So take that responsibility and realize it's time to do something about it. It's in our own hands. Next, it's to become educated. And that's what we did today. We learned about the 5 pillars, the 5 big pieces that when you work on them, you can significantly improve your wellness and your business performance. At that point, it's time to determine a plan and begin putting those things into action. And I provided just 2 practices that can already begin to put those 5 pieces into practice. And the last thing is to take action, right? So just listening to this presentation, 100% will not improve wellness and 100% won't improve performance. No way. The only thing that's actually going to help is if you do the things that we talked about, right? So taking action is the most important piece. And as long as you go through it in this way, I think that you'll be surprised at how successful you can be. So, of course, if anybody has any questions on any of those pieces, any of the things that we discussed, please feel free to reach out to me anytime. My contact information is here on the slide. And in general, I just want to point out that we went through these fairly quickly, right? This was just one presentation overviewing all 5 of the pillars. But there's so much detail that we can go into in each one of those 5. And so professionally, I work with many individuals or small or large businesses actually going through each one of the 5 and going through trainings, right? So there's still a lot more that we can learn. So if anybody is interested in learning more or seeing how this can benefit you even further, please don't hesitate to reach out anytime.